On November 21st, 1992, Tom Monfils disappeared after a workplace dispute. A day later, his body was found in a pulp vat with a 50-pound weight wrapped around his neck. Over 30 years later, exactly who killed Monfils remains a mystery. Welcome to the Monfils 6 podcast. My name is Damon Schneider.
My name's Mike Putchell.
Tonight's episode 8, is entitled Keystone Cops. And Mike and I were talking before we went on, and he wanted me to explain what the Keystone Cops were because you hadn't heard that term before.
That's right.
So the Keystone Cops, I am vaguely familiar with them. I actually looked up their YouTube videos just recently, but they did films back in like the 30s. It was kind of along those times, sort of the silent era, and it would be these short films where basically a group of cops and they were always sort of screwing up, messing up, and that was like the comedy in it. So around the time of that like Chaplin was making his films, the Keystone Cops were kind of popular, and I know in my family that was a term that was used fairly often. You know, like Keystone Cops just meant that the police were they weren't doing their jobs, or they were sort of laughable, that sort of thing.
Sure.
So that's kind of what I wanted to imply in terms of the Green Bay Police Department in terms of this episode. But we start off, Coroner Jeannie Williams contacts the Monfils family at approximately 4 a.m. The night that the body was found. Would you have contacted the family at 4 a.m.? Why or why not?
Yeah, I would say so. She contacted Monfils' parents, right?
Yeah, the Monfils family.
Yeah, to identify. Yeah, I would say so. This is an urgent matter.
So the autopsy takes place at 12:32, and it would go on for 4.5 hours across multiple areas of trauma to the head, neck, chest, and abdomen, as well as a traumatic amputation of both legs below the knee. Now, I kind of want to step back here to the Milwaukee Film Fest where I first saw Beyond Human Nature last April. In the Q&A at the end of the film, Detective Winkler stood up, and I actually have a photograph of this that I'll put on our Instagram page, which is the Monfils 6 on Instagram, that shows Winkler standing about 6 or 7 feet away from DA John Sikowski. And at this event, Winkler tells the crowd that the agitator blade would have pushed Monfils away from it. So this is sort of a key point. So if that was really true and Winkler believed that, then how did Monfils lose his legs? And you would have to think that he believes that the Monfils 6 somehow removed Tom Monfils' legs before they dropped him into the vat. Is that the way that you would read the situation, Mike?
Yeah, based on what you just said, that if he believes the agitator blade pushed the body away, then that means the blade in his eyes couldn't have done that. So then, yeah, the Monfils 6 would have been the ones to do that when they were beating him up.
So that adds a whole nother level in my mind to sort of just how improbable this actually was, especially in this time frame of,
Mm-hmm.
maybe like 15, 20 minutes that they say that this all happened. Because then they would have had to have uh, cleaned the area up and removed whatever they used to take his legs off just within a short few minutes, and hide all this information too, just within a few minutes. And it just seems very, very improbable. Now, I wanted to point out too, in the photo, John Sikowski, the DA, is about 6 or 7 feet away from Detective Winkler. And when Winkler makes this announcement that the agitator blade would have pushed the Monfiles away from it, he says nothing. He said nothing. That's difficult for me to believe in this regard, that I think at some point the prosecution determined that they wanted no talk of the body being sucked up into the agitator blade, because if that had happened, how would they ever prove how Monfiles died? I mean, do you buy into that theory?
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm on board with your theory there. What's remembered lives. Losing someone precious from our lives is the most painful event that one can endure. Seasons of Life Memorials is dedicated to making sure the person you lost is never forgotten. We work with you to help you craft a film about your loved one's life that can be viewed at the gravesite. We can also help you create a film about your very own life that can be viewed in the obituary section of your hometown newspaper. Imagine that, your friends, relatives, and neighbors viewing your own unique story and how your life truly did matter. Visit our website, seasonsoflifememorials.com, and follow us on social media today to start viewing what we can do for you.
So yeah, again, it seems almost laughable that they thought that the Monfils Six, they took Tom Monfils' legs off, and even more than that, Deputy Police Chief James Taylor held a press conference that afternoon after Monfils' body had been discovered, and stated, quote unquote, the vat had to be drained of wet paper pulp to allow recovery of the body, which had been damaged by a large propeller at the bottom of the vat. He also stated suicide and foul play is the only likely possibility. So the news conference that is conducted the day that the body is found, Deputy Police Chief James Taylor stated that the body had been damaged by the propeller. So that, to begin with, that was the theory that the police thought had happened. So at some point, the police and the DA get together and they must decide that it's not a good idea during a trial to mention that Monfils' body had been got caught up into the propeller. And this is sort of the point now where things are diverging. The person I went to the film fest with, who bought me my ticket, I actually called him before we recorded, and he actually said the same thing that Winkler had stated, that the propeller would have pushed the body away from it. So the Press Gazette, so this is the newspaper in Green Bay at the time, it seemed to have grabbed at the idea that it was foul play rather than suicide, as the foul play angle was bound to reach out and grab a few more readers. What do you think about that statement? Again, this is the author's sort of what they think, but what do you think of what the authors stated in that regard, that the newspaper wanted to sell more papers, and so they pushed the idea that this was a murder.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I can see that why that might be something that they would believe, but I don't know if that's necessarily true, if that's why they did it. Either way, though, I think there is something to be said just for the fact that regardless of what the reason was for that paper to kind of go more towards the foul play side of things, that does seem like that's what they did. It does seem like they kind of downplayed the suicide possibility.
Yeah. I took the same. I got the same vibe on that. That the newspaper within Green Bay and even just the local press almost wanted it to be a murder, because that's going to be, how the sleepy community of Green Bay, Wisconsin, and this horrific murder takes place. That's a story versus, Tom Monfils, for whatever reason, was depressed and decided to commit suicide. That's sort of a non-story, right?
Yeah, I mean usually that's true. You don't see news stories delve too deeply into suicide stories.
So I wanted to point out too at this point that Monfils had, again, two children, Teresa, 11, and John, 9, and two brothers, Mark and Cal. We've mentioned Cal before, but not Mark. And three sisters, Lois, Yvonne, and Bobby Joe. So we have only heard from Cal Monfils. Why do you think the silence between all the other brother and the three sisters?
Yeah, I actually had forgotten that too. I didn't know he had such a large family. Uh, I don't know. I would imagine they just want privacy. They don't want to be caught up in all this. I would imagine perhaps there's possibly divisions within the family as far as what really happened. So maybe they just don't want to have their opinion out there of what happened. And also, for all I know, some of them are deceased. I don't know.
One of the points that's brought up in the documentary is that Cal Monfils states that he has not seen Monfils' children really since this case went down. Does that strike you as unusual?
Well, I guess that would kind of further cement my point about the divisions. I think this clearly, I would imagine that something like this would kind of divide a family apart for various reasons. So it's a little bit unusual, but I'm not really super surprised, but I really have no idea why that would be the case. We can only speculate why he wouldn't see them.
Well, Cal Monfils, he's open about his thoughts on the case,
Mm-hmm.
whereas Sue Monfils sued and received a large amount of money. And do you think that has anything to do with it? The fact that Sue Monfils received a whole lot of money in regards to this?
No, just because I would imagine that Cal would probably have been on board with the lawsuit because you're referring to the lawsuit against the police department, right?
The one where she won what was it, $6 million?
I thought it was 2 million, but either way, it was a large amount. I would think he would have been on board with her on that one because if we're talking about the Green Bay Police Department one with them letting the tape out, I would think Cal would be completely on board with that, with Sue.
So around this time, the James River Mill, they actually hired extra security to be around the plant at the time to make the employees feel safe. Do you think that that was necessary,
No. In
and
fact,
why?
I don't like it when that's what people always do. Whenever there's some sort of incident, whether it be something like that or a mass shooting, we always, in my view, we always think that we need more security to feel safer. And in my view, we are always at risk of things happening. You have to be aware of your surroundings. So no, I've for broader reasons, for me personally, I've never been a fan of when they bring in more security for things. People are going to slip through cracks sometimes, that's what happens. But in this specific case, since I think everybody kind of knew that this wasn't like some intruder that came into the plant and there's like some, unhinged killer walking around the plant. I don't think that was ever what they thought was going on. I mean, they even wrote here that in the book that they did this to give the workers a safer feeling. I have never been a fan of that. I like just looking at, is it actually making us safer or is it making us feel safe? And let's look at what's really needed, not what we need to feel better about things. No, I don't think they needed to do this.
Memento mori. Remember, you must die someday. However, your life can be remembered forever by contacting us at seasonsoflifememorials.com. We are here to teach you how to create a film about your life that can be seen at your future gravesite, as well as within the obituary section of your very own newspaper. Contact us today at seasonsoflifememorials.com. Mike, could you describe what the legacy film option is in regards to our business?
Sure. So the legacy film, we all know that obituaries are typically worked on after somebody passes away. So obviously, the deceased is not involved in crafting any of that. Well, this legacy option is really a new way of handling an obituary. It gets you, the person who the obituary would be about, involved. You are able to craft your final word, you could say, on your own. So, this can be something that can be like a decades long project where if you start when you're younger, like 30s, 40s, we can check in with you every now and then. You can record some video of kind of just what you want to say with what's happening in your life. You can release messages to family, and then this can all be put into a final video when that time would come, when somebody would pass on, where we'd make the video into a kind of like a documentary short type thing. And it's really kind of a way for somebody to speak from beyond the grave, because this was crafted before that person passed on. So it's really a way of speaking to your children and even future generations that you never even met, and able to just tell them your story in your own words.
And we're back. On Wednesday, December 9th, Monfils' death was ruled a homicide, and a press conference was held to announce a murder investigation. So the incident event initially took place on November 21st. Why so long do you think it in between for it to be declared a homicide?
I'm not 100% sure on that. I mean, I know they had interviewed over 100 people. There were kind of some dead ends that they were hitting. So I don't know. I'm not 100% sure on that. What do you think?
From my angle, a lot of the people that they talked to basically said that there's no way Tom Monfils would have committed suicide, that he was, a happy guy with a family.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, you really have to focus in on this sort of like 10-day period right before the events of November 21st. And that's sort of gets us into the whole situation back with the phone calls between him and Kutzka playing sort of cat and mouse. And Monfils is feeling a lot of pressure at this point. And in addition, he's not sleeping well. And when you don't sleep well, you tend to make irrational choices. And so I think that maybe they didn't take that into account as much as they should have. Monfils' mental anguish over these phone calls. And maybe one of the reasons that they didn't want to talk about the phone calls is because, as stated before, Keystone cops, the police department in many ways sort of really dropped the ball in terms of the phone calls. So Monfils, he directly told the police during the initial phone conversation, he told the police actually to stay away from the James River plant. Why do you think he said that?
I think he just wanted. You're referring to how he told the call taker to not send a car, right?
Correct. Yeah.
I think he just thought that Keith would abandon the whole plan to steal the cord.
Yeah, that's what I took too. And to me, at that point, then he is definitely trying to get Keith fired. He's to go to the point.
Yeah.
To say, hey, cops don't show up because Keith might figure it out, and then there goes my plan that I had.
Well, and I'll add too, just going back a little bit to your last point about Tom not sleeping. One thing I found interesting is that really the only insight that anybody has into his state of mind during that 10-day period or so is through those phone calls, because they said he never even told his wife about all of this. He didn't tell anybody about this.
That's a good point. This is sort of like his personal torture that he's going through.
Mm-hmm.
So Kutzka dodges security, as stated before, and he's fined about $850 and loses about 5 days of work. So that's again, 1992. That's a fairly large sum of money. The interesting thing that happens, though, is that when Keith returns to work, he claims that he was innocent and that he had not taken the cord, and he sets himself up amongst the fellow employees as sort of someone who was taken advantage of. And Monfils didn't really anticipate this, did he?
I don't know. I have no idea what he thought would happen after that.
So I wanted to go back to the recording, the biker type recording. Let's take a quick listen to that right now.
There's no way he would miss my voice. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're talking about a guy that is like, a biker type. Mm-hmm. He has nothing to lose in life anyway.
Well, it usually fits the character mold for those kind of people, so.
But that doesn't do me any good if he decides, that someday in the middle of the night I don't show up at home.
So during this recording, then, Monfils is sort of frantic, telling the person he's talking to, this is Lieutenant Ken Latour. He's saying, well, Kutska is this biker type, and he's got nothing to live for. And what is Ken's response to him?
Well, he says something like that's usually isn't that when he says that's kind of like the character mold for that type of person?
Yeah, but even more so than that, sort of like the and the ahas. How did that come across to you?
That he's not really taking this seriously at all.
Yeah, he's if they were in front of each other, he'd probably be tapping his pencil and like looking up in the air, just bored. That's how seriously he's taking this situation.
Well, and he might even possibly be thinking that Monfils is a little paranoid. Maybe he has a screw loose or something.
Yeah. The key point too is no one is writing anything down when any of these conversations are being recorded. Mm-hmm. No one's writing anything down. He should have noted Tom, in a notepad. This guy who calls himself Tom has called the station multiple times. He's frantic about this tape not being released, but no one's writing anything down.
Yeah.
So eventually, of course, Kutska, he gets the tape and he learns that it was Monfils' voice on the recording. And the police at this point, they kind of feel as though sort of an ordinary mill worker kind of tricked them, right?
What do you mean? Can you go into that a little more?
That Kutska was able to obtain this tape. They felt maybe a little bit on the hand that this mill worker, who's probably not the brightest guy, just outsmarted the Green Bay Police Department.
Maybe, but I will say that I think his name was Mason. The last name was Mason. I don't know if he was an officer or a lieutenant or something, but he was like he went beyond the call of duty to get Keith that tape. I thought that was a little odd, like how out of the way he went to find information if Keith could get this thing or not.
Yeah, I did too, as well. I thought the same thing, that it seemed like he went almost out of his way to make sure that Keith could get the tape.
Well, it's almost like he thought that it's almost like he was on his side with this, like that Keith was right to find out who made the call, and to me that's they're talking about that these are supposed to be anonymous, these calls, and we didn't point this out, but this is a good time to say it. There was a loss in trust in the police department after this happened. They talk in the book about how calls to that tip line dropped significantly because of this.
Yeah, there was a tip line called Crime Stoppers, and after the events of Monfils, the number of calls pretty much dropped off to zero.
Mm-hmm.
Because no one had any faith at that point in the police.
Mm-hmm.
So Deputy Police Chief James Taylor, again, this is the person who called the news conference on the day that Monfils was his body was found. Overall, he seems to be the one who is most at fault, where he ultimately, it was his decision. And in his own words, he said, "I just let it go."
Mm-hmm. I would agree. Yeah, he was. In fact, it's really sad because, Taylor's the one who gave the initial press conference about this whole thing, and I would imagine that Taylor remembered speaking to Tom. He had just spoken to Tom a couple days before all this, before finding the body, and I wonder, did he connect that? Did he know that this is the guy that I just talked to, who was pleading and begging for anonymity And now here he is, dead in this vat.
New episodes of the Monfils 6 podcast drop every other Friday. Please join us again. Thanks for listening.
Have you recently lost a loved one and want to hold on to their memory forever? Would you like all of the world to view what their life had been about? Seasons of Life Memorials is what you are looking for. We create individual and unique documentary shorts that will allow anyone visiting the gravesite to view the documentary and your memories of the loved one. Contact us today to set up an appointment at seasonsoflifememorials.com.